All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. Tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. Remember, if you are a candidate running for office, like an opportunity to be on the show, then jump on over to candidates.libertydad.com and get yourself booked. The link is in the show notes. Available times, those are Tuesday and Thursday mornings, 7:30 a.m. for you early birds. And then for you folks that maybe don't get up so early, maybe have things that are going on, you're getting the kids out to school, you got to get to work. I get it. For you folks, I've got Wednesday and Thursday evenings at 7:30 p.m. All times are Eastern. So I try to accommodate everybody from the West Coast to the East Coast. All right, remember, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, I will not be streaming. Won't be here. No shows. So I'm spending time with my son, taking the day off, taking the rest of the week off. We're going to go do stuff. We're going to go to the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola. We're going to check that out. We're also going to build a Pinewood Derby car, so that'll be fun. Will I document them? Perhaps. We'll see. I don't know. You guys really come here more for my political takes and takes on culture than you do necessarily for, like, oh, what's he doing with his son? But sometimes I do throw that in there just, to be a little personable. Anyway, what do we got going on today? Today is another random dad musings. Normally I try to have like 3 or 4 or 5, but I don't know. I felt like the 2 that I have are going to take up sufficient amount of time. So I dialed it back a little bit. We're going to talk about 2 things. And this really all involves a super simple concept: reading. Yep, reading. And that's something that we're focusing on with our son. He's 7. And we're not like this stuff, like just age appropriate, okay? We don't talk politics with our kid. Like, he's 7. He cares about Minecraft. Like, sometimes he'll be like, "Ooh, that's Donald Trump," because like he's just seen some things, but he has no idea of any opinions about any politics in the household. He has no idea. Well, at least I don't think he does. He hasn't really expressed them. But let me tell you a funny story related to reading. So yesterday, I found out that my son is gaming the system already at 7 years old. I was like, so he has your regular schoolwork in school, and then they'll give him homework to take home, his paper homework, right? And he has to do this paper. And the way it is on Monday, actually, I log in, I download it, and I print it out. But anyway, he gets paper homework every Monday, and it's due the following Monday. He has to take it into school. And then also through the week, he has a system that he logs into, and this system has various courses. For him, he has to do reading and math, and he has to do 2 lessons in each one. So 4 lessons total for the week. And then on top of that, they want you to spend 45 minutes on each subject. So what that means is if let's say that it takes him 15 minutes to do one lesson, that would mean that he would, in theory, only be spending 1 hour's worth. Then he comes up short. So he gets his lessons in because he could do all four lessons, two in math, two in reading. And then he's got the 30 minutes each, totaling an hour, but he has to have 45 minutes. So that would mean you would go on to a third one in each respective subject, reading and math. And then you spend, the next 15 minutes to get your 45. So yesterday he's working on it on the iPad. He's doing his work, and then he's just sitting there and he said something. I don't remember what he said, but he said something and I was like, "What? What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm waiting for the time to get to 45." And I was like, "So do your work." He's like, "Well, I already did my two lessons. Now I'm just waiting for to make 45 minutes." And I was like, I immediately do. Now, what's funny about that, my wife's Asian, so my son is Asian. He's very visibly Asian. This is only playing out with the math because he gets the math done very, very quickly. The reading takes longer because you have to read, they ask questions, you have to read the questions, then you might have to go back to the text and reread it to kind of get the answer. So inevitably, he's not going to be able to do it as fast just because you can't look at numbers and be like, what's this minus this or something, like a simple question. So naturally he could do the math a little bit quicker anyway, if he's good in both. I think he tends to be better at math than reading. He's still good at reading, but better at math. So I found that amusing because I was like, oh, okay. You're reading, because I think it took him 60 minutes, or was it? Yeah, I think it was 60 minutes in this particular case. It's not always that, but his his reading usually takes longer. So I just find that amusing. And then today we're going to talk about reading and why it's so fundamentally important. And one of the things that we do with our son, and he has in his homework, is that he'll read a text and we'll be like, what did the text say? And then we'll ask questions about the text. Like, what did they mean? Who is this talking about? Who is doing the talking? Those kind of questions, so that you understand what it is that you read. So we're going to talk about that. And you might at first think that we're going to do a bill review, but we're not, actually. So let me get to this first topic. And let me show you this this post that was this was posted by Katie Miller, who I believe is Stephen Miller's wife. Okay. And let me see here. What did I want? Yeah, there we go. That's what I want. Okay. So she posted this. Now there's a Hill article, and it says federal court blocks Kennedy's vaccine changes, invalidates vaccine advisory panel. The Hill, right? Okay, there's a link to the Hill. And then Katie Miller, she says, why even have elections if any district court judge can invalidate the will of the people? And I talked about this yesterday, and I said, look, and I've talked about this a lot, actually. I said, when the administration goes to court, a lot of people, because somebody will challenge one of his executive orders or something that's happening in one of the federal agencies, and it'll get to court. And sometimes the courts frequently rule, they'll pass an injunction or something like that against Trump. And so people are like, oh, these activist judges. And I've said for a number of reasons, you can't just say activist judges. It's intellectually lazy. And I can tell right away whether, how much you know about the topic just by how you respond. I can tell, right? Because if you know a little bit about the topic, like if you spent a few minutes reading, then more than likely you will say something more specific. But if you haven't read anything, then you will say something more like, oh, activist judges. And then you don't know what you're talking about. And so yesterday we went through, we discussed a ruling. And what I did was I went through, let me see, what was the title of that episode? Oh yeah, Kelly versus Hegseth. Yeah, that was the ruling. I'm sorry. It's early in the morning. I don't know why I do shows so early. But anyway, so we talked about Kelly versus Hegseth. That was Senator Mark Kelly, and he's pushing it back against Pete Hegseth, who is basically trying to punish him for this publicity stunt that he did. And so when you read through the ruling, you don't really get the sense that it was an activist ruling. You might disagree with it, and that's fine, right? But it's not activist level. Like the things that he's saying are legitimate. He's pointing out prior court cases, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So in this particular case, you might think, well, we need to read through, and you can, but actually we're going to take a little detour in this case, and we're not going to talk about the particular ruling here so much as about rulings in general, because I want to address this. Why even have elections if any district court judge can invalidate the will of the people? This is very common. A lot of people will say, well, Trump won with a mandate. Logically, that doesn't really make any sense because he's not a king, and we had other elections, and presumably they had their mandates as well. And if a Democrat won and they have a mandate, and then Trump won, who's a Republican, and he has a mandate, then you have two conflicting mandates. Okay, and you don't, and the way our system is designed is it's not set up so that we say, well, a Democratic mayor won in Jacksonville, Florida, which is true, and so therefore she has a mandate up until it conflicts with the Trump administration, and then her mandate gets set aside for him. That's not how it works. Because if you believe that, then you don't believe in separation of powers, right? You don't believe in checks and balances. So like you cannot hold that position and say you believe that we should follow the Constitution. You just can't do that. So I wanted to dive into this because I think a lot of people are misled. And I actually found something quite fascinating. So we're going to go over to this Hill document and we're going to start reading it here. And we're going to actually read. The reading is a little heavy today. All the links are in the show notes. So I know maybe you're just like, I would rather hear you talk, not read stuff. I will do my best to read it well and not sound like a bumbling fool. Okay. So the title of this article here is Federal Court Blocks Kennedy's Vaccine Changes, Invalidates Vaccine Advisory Panel. Now, if you don't know what that's talking about, the Trump administration, he brought on RFK Jr. and he is heading up not the CDC, the Health and Human Services. So he's the secretary. And so he's basically over all of these bodies, these federal bodies, and he's instituting changes. And one of the changes was they revised the vaccine schedule so that it's not that you can't get childhood vaccines. It's just that they're saying, hey, we're taking some of these off of the list. Okay, we can have that. We can have the debate whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. And there's a variety of arguments on both sides. Okay, but he did that. And then he also he took this vaccine advisory panel and he fired everybody. So let's read this article, and then we're gonna do some learning today. Why is this? Why is this? I don't like that. That's weird. Okay. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, there. Okay, we'll have to do it this way because the websites love to put stuff on the screen for your videos and stuff. And I'm like, I don't want to watch that video. All right. Anyway. All right. So a federal judge, man, websites are so unbearable these days. A federal judge on Monday blocked Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s changes to vaccine policy, including the reduction of the recommended childhood immunizations and his remaking of a key vaccine advisory panel. U.S. District Judge Brian E. Murphy, a Biden appointee. It's like this must be one of those activist judges, right? Hold your horses, folks. A Biden appointee granted a motion by the American Academy of Pediatrics for a preliminary injunction against the reduced childhood immunization schedule earlier this year, along with the remaking of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, invalidating all votes made by the committee since. Murphy found that the reconstitution of the ACIP last year failed to abide by the Federal Advisory Committee Act. He also found that the CDC bypassing the ACIP when changing the childhood immunization schedule. What happened here? Oh, it's a refresh. The page refreshed on me. Okay. Where did it go? It moved on me. Boy, these web pages, they just, you know. All right, let's go back. It refreshed and then it just like moved down on me. Like, okay, that's not, where are we here? The court concludes that in addition to being contrary to law, the issuance of the January 2026 memo was arbitrary and capricious because it abandoned the agency's longstanding practice of getting recommendations from ACIP before changing the immunization schedules without sufficient explanation. Murphy wrote in his ruling, referring to the CDC's announcement at the start of the year altering the childhood and adolescent immunization schedule. Last June, Kennedy fired all 17 sitting members of the ACIP, claiming it was necessary to, quote, reestablish public confidence in vaccine science, end quote. He went on to appoint a slew of new vaccine skeptics and critics to the committee. Since this remaking, the new members of the ACIP went on to vote in favor of no longer recommending birth doses of the hepatitis B vaccine to delay the combined measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella vaccine, and to no longer recommend the COVID-19 vaccine for everyone 6 months and older, but to leave it to individual-based decision-making. All right. So when it came to the new members of the ACIP, Murphy acknowledged that many of them had extensive expertise in their fields. The federal judge determined, however, there are glaring gaps in the expertise relevant to the functions and tasks performed by the committee. Let's see. I think that's it. Yeah, that's all we want to read from there. So I immediately, when I was reading this, the first thing that went to my mind, I said, this sounds like procedural issues. Like there's an issue with procedures. And then I started just kind of skimming through the actual ruling, which is in the show notes if you really want to read it. And I saw that he was making reference to the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act. Now, what is that? Well, NPR, I know we're not supposed to like NPR, but good information is good information. End of the story, okay? All right. So, NPR has this article from February of last year. Trump's executive actions are getting challenged as arbitrary. What does that mean? Remember that capricious and arbitrary? All right, so let's read through this because you're going to learn some stuff today. We're going to be nerdy at 7:39 in the morning today. That's how we're doing it today. All right. President Trump has signed a number of executive actions since taking office, taking aim at everything from immigration and the size of the federal workforce to gender politics and the economy. Before the ink had dried, challengers took legal action to block many of these actions from taking effect. I'm sorry, I don't have it up on the screen. Let me fix that. Less than 3 weeks into the new administration, courts are already considering challenges to Trump's declaration that the federal government will only recognize two genders, the Department of Homeland Security's departure from a decades-old policy that encouraged immigration and customs enforcement to avoid places of worship, and the Fork Directive, email offering federal employees the option to resign in exchange for full pay and benefits through September. At the center of these challenges is the question of whether the president's actions are directing federal agencies to violate a key standard established nearly 80 years ago in a law known as the Administrative Procedure Act. The law was drawn up as a way to protect against agency overreach and actions that might be deemed, quote, arbitrary and capricious. You'll see this a lot, arbitrary and capricious. Groups are using it to challenge presidential policies by targeting the administrative agencies tasked with carrying out Trump's will. Here's how the law works. This is why I said we're going to use NPR, because if somebody says it well and breaks it down in simple terms, it's good information. I don't care if it comes from NPR. And to be honest with you, right now their website, this page, is not giving me any trouble compared to The Hill. Just saying, throwing that out there. All right, what is the Administrative Procedure Act? Enacted in 1946 on the heels of the New Deal's expansion of governmental administration, The Administrative Procedure Act, APA, became both the foundation and a guardrail for all regulatory actions coming from the executive branch. All cabinet departments, like the Defense Department or the Treasury, as well as independent agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission, must comply with the APA in all policy actions or decisions. So, whenever you hear about a federal agency and somebody's challenging it, more than likely, or maybe more times than not, you're going to find that when they take it to court, they're invoking the APA. And on several past bill reviews, we've kind of went into that and said, like, nope, they're complaining about the APA. Now, we didn't focus on this is, procedure and this is common and blah, blah, blah. We didn't get into any of that. We just kind of, talked about it as, as a legislation that Congress passed. That's all we did. So now we're going to kind of focus on the APA so that you have a better understanding when you read the headlines and then you're like, well, and then you see somebody like Katie Miller say something like, why even have elections if any district court judge can invalidate the will of the people? The will of the people said that Trump should do this. Trump went and told the agencies to do this. Why are you not why are you interfering with the will of the people? Well, because the will of the people still has to follow the law. That's why. Whether you like it or not, they have to follow the law. That's why. And that doesn't mean it's a good law, right? We can have that conversation. That doesn't necessarily mean that every accusation that it's that what Trump is doing, or any president for that matter, is violating the APA. That doesn't mean that's true either. That just means that it's not as simple as Katie is making it out to be. She's leaving out some pertinent info. All right, let's back to this. All cabinet departments, like the defense, I'm sorry. The APA was signed by President Harry Truman and received bipartisan support after a decade-long effort by Republican and Democratic lawmakers. Concerned with burgeoning administrative state after the New Deal expanded the role of executive agencies, I'm just saying, maybe there's a root cause right there in that statement. Just throwing that out there, could be a root cause. New Deal, expanded role, executive agencies. That line right there tells you a lot, okay? Anyway, Republicans wanted judges to review and curb the executive branch's growing influence. Oh, that's wild. Republicans today, people on social media, Katie Miller, which, by the way, that's Stephen Miller's wife. I don't know if I mentioned it a moment ago. Stephen Miller in the White House, crazy psycho. Yeah, that's his wife, okay? She's whining about the will of the people. She's Republican. He's Republican. We have a Republican administration. They keep getting challenged, and nobody seems to want to remember, oh, yeah, by the way, when we implemented the New Deal, Republicans were like, whoa, hold up here. We need some checks and balances on these federal agencies. Then scroll forward 80 years, and now people are bitching and whining about judges doing exactly what once upon a time Republican lawmakers wanted them to do, which was to be a check and balance on federal agencies. So Republicans out there who are crying about this, sorry, blame I don't want to say forefathers, but kind of, blame Republicans of the past, or maybe blame the fact that we have the New Deal in the first place. That you could do that. It's crazy. All right, let's continue. Democrats saw administrative action as an efficient means for advancing public policy since it doesn't need to go through Congress. Now, I could have a whole conversation about that, but we're not going to. I do want you to keep that in mind. That's going to be kind of relevant a little bit later. They wanted to use the act as a roadmap directing agencies to set consistent and effective policies. Does sound kind of admirable, doesn't it? Why does the Administrative Procedure Act matter? Presidents often enter office with a political agenda that touches on a number of issues. Okay, no argument there. That's what happens. The agenda can become policy if a president is successful in pushing new laws through Congress. Also true. Other times, a president may choose to set policy by issuing an executive action, which does not need to go through Congress to have legal force. That's unfortunately also true, right? In my opinion, executive orders, they should be very limited in what they can actually do, right? There are some, if you say, hey, I'm signing this executive order declaring today, DL day, fine, whatever. Okay. But if you're trying to do something that forces people to do a thing or to follow a rule or to be punished, if they don't, then I have an issue with it being in an executive order. Conversation for a different day. All right. So let's see. However, the president cannot single-handedly turn ideas into actions. That's where executive agencies come in. Most executive actions set a policy and then direct the responsible federal agencies to take steps to carry out that policy. For instance, declaring an emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border required a joint effort among the State Department, the Justice Department, and the Department of Homeland Security, including some of its smaller agencies like Customs and Border Protection. If the president is the executive branch's brain, sorry. Ooh. I just had a moment where I wanted to laugh heartily. Let me regain my composure here. Okay. I've got my composure. These agencies are the limbs. Okay, I'm sorry. I just find this an amusing way of phrasing it. All right. Let's get back to seriousness, okay? This is serious business, folks. Carrying out the president's directive in an executive order requires these agencies to issue rules, policies, and judgments that align with the president's stated goals. Okay, so hopefully if you didn't already know, hopefully you are now starting to understand the picture of what's wrong here in the United States. We passed legislation a long, long time ago that basically vested a lot of authority into federal agencies who are not elected, for the record. Okay? And then we said, okay, we don't want the president to have too much power. Let's put in some guardrails. So let's make sure that judges can review this. Okay? So now we have basically a mini version of the legislative branch and the judicial branch. It's like a little mini version of it. I would argue that it's probably not constitutional. Again, conversation for some other day. Everything agencies do to implement the president's agenda must follow the APA. They have to. That is law. So whenever somebody on the right or on the left, they're like, the law is the law. Okay? Okay, so is the Administrative Procedure Act. Conservatives. Right? And your conservative president who has a mandate to save America still has to follow it. Anytime the Federal Communications Commission bans profanity from the airwaves, say, or whenever the Environmental Protection Agency issues a permit, the agency must comply with APA procedures. This is one way to ensure the executive branch stays within its stated role, which Georgetown law professor David Super told NPR's Morning Edition is important to preserving the meaning of U.S. laws. Here's our Constitution. Says the president shall take care that the laws are faithfully executed, said Super. If the president pushes policies that exceed our notions of what the executive can do, Super warns, quote, any president in the future can largely do whatever they want. Okay? So these are protections for you, America. That's what they're protections for. You're being protected. Right? From a tyrannical executive branch, particularly the president. That's why you see all these cases, right? Because of the kind of government that we have. What Trump's use of executive authority may mean for the future presidential power. Importantly, the APA also allows anyone harmed by an agency's action to file a lawsuit stopping the agency from enforcing it. Federal courts then review the validity of the policy based on standards provided in the APA. While not all Trump's executive actions have implicated the APA, This is a key area in which groups are hoping to successfully challenge some of Trump's policies. However, the use of this standard is not unique to those challenging the Trump administration. Here's a great quote by that same law professor. Every president who has served since 1946, notes Super, at one point or another has run up against the arbitrary and capricious standard, end quote. We're going to look at that in detail in just a moment. First, what is an arbitrary and capricious agency action? A core feature of the APA is protecting against arbitrary and capricious agency actions. The goal for challengers is for judges to find an agency's policy so absurd that it is considered arbitrary, canceling its enforcement. Asked what this means in practice, Super explained. That means there have to be permissible reasons for things that are done. It's fine if I decide that your business should be suspended because you're selling dangerous foods, but it's not fine if I say your business should be suspended because I don't like you, he said. Now, that's probably a little bit contrived in comparison to what actually happens, but that gives you a good example. Like, it's just basically saying these federal agencies have vested within them certain power. The APA says, okay, you have this power, you have to use it wisely. And if you don't, people can challenge it in court and force you to reverse whatever you did. This standard is useful because it allows courts to invalidate a policy even when the agency has otherwise complied with the APA's requirements, which include things like notifying the public of a proposed rule and inviting public commentary or promptly explaining the denial of a grant application. In other words, even if an agency followed all other APA rules in issuing an action, a court still could invalidate the action for being arbitrary. However, an arbitrary and capricious review is not always an easy bar to meet. Judges must defer to an agency's decisions and findings unless they seem patently unreasonable. While plaintiffs could challenge agency actions under standards with a higher bar, it is incredibly common to challenge agency actions as arbitrary and capricious because this standard is commonly used to evaluate agencies' rulemaking procedures and policy decisions. Basically, they're just it's like if you want to make it super simple, it would be like me having some standing to challenge an agency and saying you did that just because you felt like it, right? Like you just made it up. You didn't even have a good reason. And if you read some of the rulings, you will see that that the attack will be that this person, that this agency did a thing and the rationale wasn't explained, or it was very poor rationale, or the rationale, was far different than prior rationale. So they'll rely on like history and precedent and stuff like that, right? Those are the things that it gets challenged on. All right. When do courts tend to find that an agency action is arbitrary? There are a number of reasons a court might strike down an arbitrary agency action. Some cases center on the evidence that agencies must provide to justify their actions. A court may find that agencies' evidence or fact-finding was incomplete or lacked merit, right? Like, I don't know. I didn't really read through the issue with vaccines and RFK and this particular ruling, but it could be that the challenger said, hey, you didn't even present, good fact-finding evidence. You just sloppily looked at a couple of websites and you made a decision. And that's not how we roll here. And so, they're going to obviously dress it up in more legal language, but that's the gist of it. Other actions are struck down for a clear error in the agency's judgment. Sometimes a court is not satisfied that the agency considered every relevant alternative when formulating the policy. The federal employees challenging fork directive email couched this as a failure to consider possible adverse consequences, right? So it is pretty broad, this APA, and then more specifically, the capricious and arbitrary standard. It is pretty broad. What also is broad, the federal agency's power to do things, to implement things, to force people to adhere to specific standards, to do certain things, to, basically spend their resources to be in compliance. That's pretty broad as well. That's probably our big problem, is that at the federal level, we have this broad power. That power should probably be at the state level. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. They're like, oh, the state writes you, right? But I would argue, and we're not going to get into it, but I would argue that's a better place for it. And then state courts can work it out. And you might have California and Florida doing different things. And California might say, well, we understand that Florida found it over here for their agency of a similar nature, but we see it differently and we're going to do things differently. And then California courts could say, well, this adheres to standards here in California. And then Florida could say, we're keeping ours because it adheres to standards here in Florida, whatever those standards might be about whatever issue they're talking about. Right. All right. So that's basically, and that's enough for NPR there. I'm sure that some of you might have been like, I wish he was talking about this. Come on, DL. You're giving me a hard time. All right. Now, here's the real question. But isn't Trump getting it more? Right? And is there any data on like how often this happens and things like that? Well, as it turns out, there is. There's a whole website dedicated to focusing on these types of challenges. It's got way more information than you probably care about. But we're going to look at some of that. Okay? So let's go back. Let's go back to what I told you we're going to do a lot of reading today. Okay? Tracking major rules in courts. Okay, this is a website, policyintegrity.org. Yeah, you can go check it out. It's in the show notes. All right. It's pretty interesting. Presidents enact large parts of their agendas through federal agencies' rules. But these are often challenged in court. This project explores how often major rules are challenged in federal court and how they've fared in litigation across time. And so it studies, says the study covers 2,321 major rules issued from 1996, when the Congressional Review Act was enacted, through the end of the Biden administration. The CRA's enactment provided the starting point because it created the major rules category. We coded each major rule for several variables, included the administration and agency that issued the rule, right? And so then they've compiled all this information. So I got a bunch of links here we can look at. Challenge rates. How often are presidents challenged? We got some data on that. How often do the agencies win? We're not going to look at that. That's a little bit too dry even for me. Presidential wins. I mean, all it does is break down which agency. It's like, okay, this department was challenged this many times. This is how many times. What? I don't really care about the breakdown. But if you do, go check it out. Presidential win rates. We care about that. We want to see. And then there's forum shopping. I don't care about that. Which courts are challenged. Basically, sometimes they'll find a court that they think is going to be more friendly to their side and give them a win. That's very normal. We've talked about that before. And then other analysis, there's one thing in there that I'll show you. So let's check it out. All right. So this is challenge rates. And they got this cool little graph. All right. And we can see it. Now I tried to zoom in on it, but it starts getting a little bit harder to see. So there we go. I think that'll work. All right. So challenge rates by presidential term. Okay. So we can see that Biden, his term was challenged 449 total rules. Basically 29% were challenged. 29% of his rules were challenged. Trump, term 1, 28%. So Trump's first term and Biden's first term had the same percentage of challenges when it came to these rules. Basically, federal agencies, go do this. This is the policy that I ran on. This is what I want you to do, right? So roughly 29% of the time, almost 30% of the time, they were challenged. A little lower for Obama's second term, 22%, 21%, 21.5% for his first term, 20% for Bush in his second term, which was better than his first, or which is worse than his first term, presumably, if you look at it that way. which was 15%. Then we have 17 and 14 for Clinton's second and first, respectively. Okay? So again, this is just showing you that we're seeing an increase percentage-wise of the agency rules that are being challenged. Now, you could dig in and find out whether or not that increase is reasonable, unreasonable. We're not going to get into that. We're just going to try to do a little bit of learning so that we understand, oh, why are these things happening? So that we don't go out there like Katie Miller and ask dumb questions like, why do we have elections if any district court judge can invalidate the will of the people? I don't know, Katie. Why have the American Procedure Act if you're not going to follow it? If it's not going to be something that you accept as law? How about we ask that question, Katie? All right, so let's go back here. We're looking at, go here. So now let's check out, this is the presidential win rates. I got a cool chart there too, right? This is win by administration. So this is just the administration, not broke down by terms. You could actually go down lower and see it by terms. We're not going to do that. We're just going to kind of get an idea here. All right. So, and this is, again, major rules. You can go and look up specifically what major rules means. All right. So we see that Biden, 52% of the time, he lost. He won 40% of the time, and it's mixed 7.1% of the time. I'd have to dig in to find out what mixed exactly means. Trump's first term, he won a little bit less, 32%, compared to Biden, who won 40% of the time. Mixed, he had more mixed. He had 4 percentage points more mixed at 11.5 versus 7.1. And then he lost 56% of the time. And we see that's a huge drop off from Obama, Bush, and Clinton, who won more than 50% of the time. Okay. And it looks like Clinton had substantially more wins than anybody. Now, if you're looking at this, you might have noticed that Clinton, Obama, and Biden did better than Trump. Bush didn't do too bad, but he still was behind Clinton, and he just barely beat Obama, okay, in wins. There's a reason for that. We'll get to that in just a second, okay? I think. Did I lose? I might have lost that one. I might just have to tell you, but that's okay. So that's the win rates. Win rates, if I can get this. All right. Other analysis. Oh, this is the one. Yeah. So partisan trends. All right. Because I told you, this website breaks it down more than you probably care to know. I forgot about this page. I was like, oh, I forgot. I closed that browser tab, but I didn't. Many empirical studies have examined whether there is a correlation between agency win rates and the party of the president who appointed the reviewing judges. The study identified A, the party of the individual judges or majorities appointing presidents, and B, the opinion authors appointing president. Agencies fared slightly worse before Republican appointees than before Democratic appointees, with win rates just below the overall average by controlling opinion, 57%. Agency win rates were higher when the appellate majority was mixed. That's basically when you've got a mixture of the judges that are on the panel. So let's take a look at that. All right. So here we go. Republican appointees, right? They deliver wins 48% of the time. Democratic appointees deliver wins 54.7% of the time. What did we read a little bit ago? Let me see if I can even find it back here. We're going to scroll back here. Here it is. Remember this line that I told you not to forget from NPR. Democrats saw administrative action as an efficient means for advancing public policy since it doesn't need to go through Congress. They wanted to use the act as a roadmap directing agencies to set consistent, effective policies. So Democrats liked this originally, right? And Republicans were weary of it, so they were like, we need to have judicial review. So then we go back over here, and we see that that Democratic appointees, when there's a Democratic appointee, they deliver a win to their party more often, okay? Agency win rates by party of the president who appointed the judge, all right? Democrats higher. Republicans, lower. That kind of makes sense. Democrats tend to like they like the New Deal. They like the administrative actions. Now, let's be honest. Republicans do too when it serves them. But I think this kind of explains why we see, if we go back to the presidential win rates, why we see that Trump was pretty low, right? But Biden was far higher. Not because they're activist judges, but because a president that appoints a judge is going to appoint a judge based on their jurisprudence. Do I like the way that you think? Do I like the way that you rule? Therefore, I will put you into place. This is not a, hey, you're going to do our bidding. That's how people present it. It is, do we share a similar mindset? Okay, we do. But then on top of that, you have this historical, Democrats really saw the administrative state as the place to be, where they could enact the social policies that they approve of. As a libertarian, one of the things that I've said is that I tend to align more with Republicans when it comes to, I align more with Republicans when it comes to domestic policies, but I sharply run away on foreign policy. Now, this is kind of old school because things kind of seem to be changing right now. And then with Democrats, I actually preferred the old school Democrats who were anti-war. I preferred their foreign policy, but I disliked their domestic policy. And so what we can see with this data is we can see how that plays out. But again, it's not necessarily activist judges. And a lot of it has to do with procedure. Are you following the rules? And these guardrails that were put into place by Congress. So we're not exactly talking activism here. We're literally talking the rule of law. So when you see posts like that, just have a good hearty laugh. Okay? Because that's all that it really deserves. Now, let's see. Where are we on time here? I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to go to intermission. We'll be right back. Then we'll talk about Dave Smith. We'll see what's going on with him. So we'll be right back.
The day I got cited, I was blindsided.
I couldn't believe that I was in America. I left a place where that stuff happens, but not here. Here, this is the land of opportunity.
I didn't do anything wrong.
I just couldn't believe it. I didn't do anything wrong.
You think that you're doing things the right way. You think that you're a law-abiding citizen.
And they said I was under arrest for braiding hair, and they took me to jail.
They seized a little over $100,000 out of my business account here. Took 13 years to get it and less than 13 seconds, I guess, to take it away.
I remember my attorneys telling me, most people don't win against the government.
Because I know now that we have more than just a chance. I know that we're going to keep our homes.
If we win here at the U.S. Supreme Court, it makes a difference for my girls and for so many other families.
I'm fighting back because I don't want to have a lot of other people have to go through the same thing I'm going through with their property getting seized.
We changed the laws so that everybody else can be treated fairly.
I want the opportunity
To operate my legal business.
To practice my craft.
To meet the needs of my community in an innovative way.
And someone has to stand up.
All right. Love those guys over at the Institute for Justice. They do some great work. So now, let's shift gears and let's talk Dave Smith. What trouble has he gotten himself into? Dave Smith's a friend of mine. We don't talk on the regular, but whenever we are at an event, give each other a fist bump, and I like him. I think he's good. I don't always agree with him. I have some disagreements. But let's see what he said, because it got people talking. So he says, let's see, where's my, let me miss this here. He said, Islam is such a violent religion. Every time we murder a bunch of their children, they try to kill some of us. Disgusting. And people are like, what? Like, because they got it, sort of, but not really. They got it in the sense that they were like, oh, so you're saying Islam is a religion of peace? And there is a huge movement. I don't want to say a movement. There's like a lot of momentum right now on social media to declare Islam violent. I'm not going to get into that because that's not what Dave was saying. Dave was not saying Islam is violent, or he's not saying Islam is not violent. What he was saying is perhaps there are other reasons out there that people do things. For instance, if we kill somebody's children, they might be kind of angry with you. They might want vengeance. They may want revenge, and they may kill people, even the wrong people, just to feel better. Okay? That's what do you say? And that matches everything he's ever said. If you go back and you look at his post, if you go back and you look at his debates, you will find that he has constantly said, stop killing innocent people. When you kill innocent people, their families get mad. They come after you, right? And it's wild because like yesterday was the 16th. A lot of people say, oh, it's Gary Plausch Day, right? Gary Plausch, I don't remember what year it was, but many years ago, found out his son's karate instructor was molesting him. The instructor was arrested and was being transported to presumably his trial. And they were walking through an airport, and Gary Plausch ambushed and shot him. So he didn't have to go to court. So a lot of people are like, wow, what a great dad, right? And a lot of people on the right say that. A lot of the same people that will criticize Dave Smith for this comment. They'll be like, oh, it's Gary Plausch Day. Dave Smith, how dare you say that? Right? What are they saying? Well, they're saying that they get it. They understand that when somebody harms somebody that you love, you might be willing to do very bad, foul, terrible, evil things. Things that you shouldn't do. All Dave is saying. Pointing out. And this has been constant commentary coming out of the anti-war crowd. We keep trying to tell people, when you harm somebody, their family member probably wants to harm you back. It's not, and so we have to delineate between, hey, this person was just straight up radicalized by Islam and they went and harmed people only for the reason of Islam, versus the person who might also be a Muslim and say, hey, you killed my children, therefore I want blood. And when people get into that mode, they don't have a tendency to focus on the actual perpetrator. They will take somebody by proxy, right? And we do that, as we're going to find out here in just a moment. But first, let's see how some of the people responded to Dave. Let's just check it out. Humble Flow. Islam was slaughtering Christians long before America even existed. Do you know anything about history? I don't know, Humble. Do you know anything about reading and comprehension? Dave did not say that Islam has been a peaceful religion all throughout history. This is surprising. That is not what he said. These people drive me crazy. I am going to switch so that when I'm actually looking at the screen, it looks at, but bear with me. If you're listening on Spotify or something, you're probably like, what's he talking about? I've got a mismatch when I'm looking at my monitor to read this. It looks like I'm looking off screen and not at the actual text on the screen. So anyway, I'll get that fixed one of these days. What else we got? There are currently 11 wars in the world. Only 2 do not primarily involve Islam. Okay. Did Dave say, man, these Islam folks, they just never... I know Muslims. These Islam folks, they never start wars. Did he say that? No. These are what we call straw men, right? This is not what Dave said. People are attacking something he didn't say, and they're like, aha, I got him. I dunked on that man. Okay. Dunked on yourself by showing us your reading comprehension skills, but okay. And perhaps razor fist, it's good that you stay anonymous. That way people don't associate your real face with your reading and comprehension. Gad said, what is so frustrating about such a buffoon is that he is impervious to his orgiastic imbecility. There is less evidence for gravity than there is for Islamic-based violence over the past 1,400 years, but Wikipedia Dave knows better. Well, I'm glad Thesaurus Assad was able to demonstrate his linguistic prowess and Twitter prose, I guess. But also, that's not what Dave was saying. And I know that Gad Sad can read. I know he's a smart man. Some of these other folks that are behind anonymous accounts, I don't know. Maybe you were one of those high school graduates that, didn't do so well, but got to graduate anyway. Jerry Callahan, the Muslim terrorist in Michigan, tried to kill 140 kids because his terrorist brother got taken out by a foreign country 6,000 miles away. I mean, who could blame him, right, Dave? Totally understandable. Okay, Gary, well, guess what? That's not what Dave was saying. He didn't say it's understandable. He's saying there is a cause. There is... how they say it? For every cause, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Basically what he's saying. You kill somebody, they want to kill somebody. Does that mean they're going to go kill the right somebody? No, it does not. And it's not justification. But again, how do you... Okay, let's put it this way. Since everybody seems so obsessed with how violent Islam is, we'll just say that for it. We'll take that at your word. We'll not argue that point. How are you going to properly deal with a violent religion if you are incapable of separating when it's the religion that's calling people to be violent and when it's somebody's, when it's somebody's family member that's died and they said, you know what, F it, I'm going to take action. How are you going to beat a religion of violence, so you claim, when you cannot distinguish when it's the religion that's caused it and when it's something else? How can you do that? Because you're going to apply the wrong solution. I mean, if you really want to deal with the religion of violence, as you guys are claiming it, okay, fine. Deal with that and learn to say, yeah, we believe that Islam is violent. It's, written all through the Quran that they probably never read, but hey, that's what you believe. Fine, say that, but then learn to also say, in this instance, the cause appears to be something slightly different. This man lost family in Lebanon, which is what happened. The man that went and attacked a synagogue, like the night before, he had posted pictures of his family that had been killed by Israeli rockets. And so he was angry. He was a Muslim. More importantly, he was angry. As I've said before, if you harm my child, you better hope you're not within my vicinity. I'm not the biggest and the baddest, but you're going to find out that even 5'3", 120-pound me can be dangerous. Okay? And every man should be. I remember Jordan Peterson, he came out one time and he said, there's a video of him, and he's talking about men. He said, a lot of people say, oh, don't be dangerous, don't be violent. And he goes, no. You need to be a monster, capable of absolute, terrible, vicious, god-awful violence. Now, I'm paraphrasing him heavily here, but he did say this. And he said, after you become a monster, then you need to learn to control it, right? I can be a monster when it comes to my family. And I expect every other man out there to also have the capacity to be a monster. And then also have the capacity and the judgment to know when it's time to be a monster and when it's not time to be a monster. And there will be some people who can be a monster to the wrong people. That's all that Dave is expressing here. Based, I love this Roman helmet guy. Based libertarian comic Dave Smith is now implying that terrorist attacks against American civilians are justified. No, he's not, Roman helmet guy. And it's, again, good thing that you're anonymous. Because otherwise we could all look and go, oh my goodness, Roman helmet guy, he never learned to read parchment. You guys drive me crazy. Islam is the only religion allowed to indiscriminately target innocents due to perceived grievances in war zones halfway around the world. Nobody said allowed. Dave Smith, like myself, has said many, many times, if you kill innocent people, you are not defending yourself. You are not defending your loved ones. That is almost a direct quote. I could go pull up the video of it. I don't have it, but I could go find it because I posted it. He said, he's like, look, if you're killing innocent people, you're not defending yourself. That's what happened in this story. The guy killed innocent people. The question is, why? Did he do it just because the Quran or Islam told him to? Or did he do it because he was disgusted and in grieving with his kids? And again, we're explaining what happened, why it happened, so that we can address it. You cannot solve a problem you can't identify. Weird. No Vietnamese terrorist attack happened after the West against the West after the U.S. and France bombed and invaded their country for over 3 decades. Okay. Just because you point out that somebody may kill somebody or harm somebody because their loved one was harmed doesn't mean that every single person out there who has a loved one that gets harmed will do the same thing. All we're trying to tell you people is this happens. There are 8 billion people on the planet. If you can't figure out that some of them will take out their anger on the wrong people, you do not belong in the conversation because you are not intelligent enough for it. So again, it's not suggesting that it's okay. It's just saying sometimes it's for this reason, sometimes it's for this reason. If it's for reason A, the solution might be 1, 2, or 3. If it's reason B, the solution might be 4, 5, or 6. There might even be some overlap. But you have to first identify what is going on, why somebody did it. If somebody kills somebody, let's put it this way. Let's say you have a crazy man, legitimately crazy. He's schizophrenic, hears voices, just all kind of bad stuff, right? And he's not been taking his medication. And he goes out and he thinks that his neighbor is got this weird plot against him. Again, this is his mental disorder. And then he goes and he attacks his neighbor to defend his home or whatever he thinks he's doing. And if we later say that guy did it just because he has no respect for the law, that's what it is. And if I come out and I go, the dude was crazy and he hadn't been taking his medication. And if you come back and you go, DL, I can't believe you would support that. Not supporting it. I'm trying to tell you that his lack of respect for the law is not the reason that he did it. I'm trying to tell you that the reason he did it is because he was mentally imbalanced, was off his medication. So therefore, the answer is, how do we make sure that people who are mentally imbalanced and need to be on medication remain on their medication so they don't harm their neighbors? That's what I'm telling you. That's how that story works out. That's not justifying the action. And it's not saying that he does or does not have any respect for the law. When you're crazy, you probably don't have respect for the law. Kind of part of being crazy, kind of what it means, right? Your thinking is wrong. It's off. It's imbalanced. Well, the same thing happens when your loved one is murdered, right? You're not crazy per se, but your thinking is off, right? Maybe it's because you're grieving heavily Maybe you're just that angry, whatever. All right. And maybe maybe in any other situation, you wouldn't want to harm people. But in this particular one, you do. Okay. So now we have to figure out, okay, how do we address that? How do we address the guy who's grieving and angry and wants to hurt somebody, anybody, doesn't matter who it is, somebody, and let's look at the victims. The victims it was a synagogue. Israel rockets killed his kids. I mean, if you cannot see the very, very loose connection there. Now, it's not a good connection. And again, not defending it. Absolutely immoral and wrong. He should be punished completely. If you go into a synagogue to harm Jewish people because your children were killed by Israelis, not the same. Jewish people, Israelis, not necessarily the same. Okay? If you do that and somebody in there happens to have a firearm and they blow your head off, I'm gonna shake their hand and say, you did a good job. You defended your people. Okay? So I'm not defending it. And I'm not defending actions against it. And if you are successful and then you get arrested and then you get put in jail for a bazillion years or whatever, okay, that's what happens. You should have controlled yourself. But that doesn't mean that we don't retroactively look at it and say, all right, what was the reason here? And is there something we can do about it? Or is it this issue? Okay, in this case, it's not this issue. It's something else. So we can continue working off of incidents that fit the issue of radical Islam. Go back to our comments because we're not done. We got some more. All right. Let's see. Oh, this one's great. From Ben Sixsmith. Blowback stopped being an even vaguely far-reaching explanation for Islamic terrorism when at the height of the Iraq War, jihadis decided to focus on their attention on Danish illustrators. Again, not everything is blowback. Okay? Not everything is not blowback. That's why we have to look at these things one at a time and say, in this particular case, radical Islam. In this particular case, blowback. And it could be a combination. We could see that there's blowback that's supported in the mind of the person, not by me, not by the rest of us, supported in the mind of the person by their religious beliefs. People might remember years and years ago, 20, 30 years ago, abortion doctors here in the United States were at risk of being harmed. There were one or two that were attacked. Can you take any guess, just a wild guess, who might have attacked them? Just Christian? Somebody who claimed to be a Christian, maybe a radical Christian, right? Does that mean Christianity in itself is violent? No. Does that mean that maybe there were some teachings that supported violence? Yes, perhaps. Or maybe it was just the person misinterpreted it all. It could be that they went to a church that said, God wants us to do something about abortion doctors, whatever it takes. And then the person listening goes, boom, whatever it takes, huh? I got a gun. I'll go figure this out, right? So it could be that situation. It could be that the person was listening to the sermon and the sermon was like, we're going to pray for all these innocent children and we're going to, hope that, the Supreme Court shuts this down. And the guy says, I can't wait on the Supreme Court. I'll go do it myself. Or he could just be legitimately crazy. Whatever the case was, you can't address the next one if you don't properly identify that one. That's what's going on. So, is it blowback? In some ways, yes. Is that an excuse? No. Not an excuse. It just means we now have a better understanding of why somebody did something. That's all that it means. And you nincompoops out there cannot seem to understand this. Well, we got a couple more. Explain Sweden. Why? We're in America. Why don't we focus on that? You can't even explain America and you want us to worry about Sweden? I don't give a damn about Sweden. And like I said a moment ago, people do things for different reasons. Figure out those reasons and then address them. Rather than having one neatly packaged solution, you might have to figure out 3 or 4 of them and say, this situation is not the time for solution number 1. This situation requires solution number 2. Because we're humans. We have things called IQs and brains and the ability to reason. And so therefore, we have used all of that together to identify why somebody might do something. And then now we're going to apply this action, this solution, so that hopefully the next person that fits this same reasoning won't do it. Do you want to stop killing, or do you just want to dunk on Dave because you don't like him? Take your pick, because right now you're showing me one of them. And I'm not defending Dave just because he's my friend, okay? Dave will tell you, if I disagree with him, I will disagree. I disagree with everybody at some point. Like I've said before, it's why I don't have a whole lot of friends in the Libertarian Party or movement, because a lot of people are very happy when I'm dunking on their opponents, but then when it comes their turn, they don't like it so much. And it just so happens that right now I'm defending Dave because people are dumb. Let's see, last comment. Have you ever read a book? What book tells me why the man went to a synagogue and attacked Jewish people? Tell me, mimetic Sisyphus, which book is that one? I'll read it. Go ahead. Tell me the book that will explain this particular situation. Because that's the one we're talking about. But people want to be like, well, you know, the Ottoman Empire. The F all has that got to do with what happened a week ago? You can't tell me, because you'd have to first learn the circumstances and the details of this event, which is how our legal system kind of works, you know? Prosecutors go out, they find all this information, they develop their case, and they say, this is why you're guilty. You're guilty because you knew better. You knew this was wrong. You were a murderer. You committed murder because you had time to think about it. You planned it out. You wrote a whole journal about how you were going to kill this guy, right? Therefore, it's murder. Versus, oh, this one's just manslaughter because you killed somebody in the course of an immediate action. You didn't spend time planning this one out, so we're calling it manslaughter, right? We literally have a legal system that digs down deep into the details and says, nope, this person is guilty because of this reason, or this person is guilty because of this reason. But honestly, since half of you guys don't even understand the APA and federal agencies and stuff like that, I guess I shouldn't expect you to understand this, and that you guys can come up with these dumb answers like, have you ever read a book? Have you ever paid attention to anything in our society? How about that, mimetic? All right, now, I'm not done, because there's video that I think illustrates my point. Because I posted last night, I said, all right, if people don't want to listen to Dave, maybe they'll listen to Laura Loomer, who basically said the same thing. Not about this incident, but she made the same point. So let's watch this video. This comes from Dave's debate with Laura Loomer. Was it like a year ago, year and a half ago? Something like that. He was debating her on the issue of Palestine and Israel, and whether or not Israel's was taking things too far. So I want you to hear this exchange. You can go and check out the whole video in the show notes. It's there. But I want you to listen to this video and see if you learn anything.
If you watch your mother and your father get blown up, you're probably going to have a spirit of revenge, and you're going to have deep-seated hatred and want to kill. Anybody would want to kill somebody that killed their family member, right? I think. Oh, that's weird. But anybody would want to kill somebody that killed their family member. So she acknowledges this idea that people want vengeance and revenge. That's just human nature. Whether it's, a drunk driver, whether it's an act of terrorism, whether it's a murder, whether it's, whatever it may be.
Vengeance is...
It's vengeance, okay? Vengeance.
So do you think that plays a part in the Palestinians' hatred for Israelis?
I think that it may play a part.
9/11 happened to us.
All right, I want you to listen. I want you to listen very, very carefully to this point that he made that is very relevant in this situation.
the American attitude after 9/11. We gave George W. Bush a blank check.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want to do. Drop bombs on whoever the hell you want to drop bombs on. Because we are pissed off because we got hit and someone else has to suffer for this.
Oh. You see the point there? Everybody's so busy trying to find reasons why Islam is, the most dangerous religion out there. Look at what they did in 1400 years ago. They've been doing this. There's radical. And look, if you want to have that conversation, we can have that conversation. We can have a conversation about how it is that you believe this is a religion of violence when there are 2 billion adherents on the planet. It's literally like a quarter of the whole planet. 2 billion adherents on the planet. And depending on your source, somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 active fighters willing to go out and cause death, destruction, and mayhem. Right? We can talk about that if you really want to have a conversation and say, hey, how is it that such a small fraction are the ones that are committing all the violent acts, whereas it's literally a fraction of a percent, 1 to 200,000. Even if it was 500,000, which would be a lot, and don't get me wrong, 100,000, they can harm a lot of people. That I am not downplaying the potential danger with the 100,000. But I am pointing out that when you compare it to the whole, when there's 2 billion people practicing Islam, and then you have somewhere between 1 and 200,000 who are the ones that are committing acts of terrorism and violence, then you have a ginormous proportion who are not. And the reason they don't get talked about is because how do you talk about it? How do you talk about an event that didn't happen? You can't. So it's natural in our minds to say, well, the ones that we saw keep happening. Yeah, because there's like 100 to 200,000 of them. And they're probably growing some in numbers. And then on top of that, like we saw in the video, vengeance is a thing. And so on top of that, if somebody has been getting the message in Islam, they've been getting the message from at least some corners that, hey, you got to take action. You got to be violent. Look at these infidels, right? If they've been getting that message and they're like, yeah, that's the crazy guy. And Christianity has that too, right? How many people, there are plenty of pastors. I know 2 of them right now. 2 pastors who will tell you Paula White, the one that advises Donald Trump, is crazy. She's batshit crazy in terms of her theology. I know 2 pastors at least that'll say that, and I could easily find a whole bunch more, okay? And she's not necessarily telling people to go kill people. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying every religion, every group has their outliers. They're crazies. They're radicals. Every single one of them, okay? I demonstrated that with Christianity. We had our radicals. We meaning like here in the United States, all right? We had our radicals here in the United States. You had the Christian Crusades. You have stories in history, they have also done horrible things. But then when you compare them to the whole, people will easily say, well, most Christians aren't like that. Okay, well, fine. Most Muslims aren't like that. How do you like those bananas? Huh? Like, if we're going to talk objectively and we're going to talk factually, then we have to. Okay? And in that clip, what we heard is hey, people that have had somebody close to them harmed want to harm somebody. It's natural. Laura Loomer admitted it. She acknowledged the same point that Dave is now making, that everybody's all like, oh, I can't believe it. He's just supporting Islam. Is she? I promise you, nobody on this planet will accuse Laura Loomer of supporting radical Islam. Nobody. Not even the crazy people. The crazy people will be like, oh, the government's trying to do this. They're getting inside my head with their brainwaves. But Laura Loomer doesn't support the radical Muslims. They will snap out of their craziness just to tell you that. Because that's how obvious it is. And so when she makes that point, I don't know, maybe there's a point to be made. Hello? Maybe the problem is that everybody's busy playing team sports. basically, with politics, which really means you are playing team sports with people's lives. And that makes you kind of disgusting and gross. Because if you're unwilling to sit down and say, this was based on radical Islam, this was not, then you are basically playing games with other people's lives. Because you're unwilling to say, I'm going to do what it takes to get to the truth so that people's lives don't have to end unnecessarily. That's what you're doing. That's why I get a little angry. That's why I'm like, hey, there are plenty of very, very peaceful Muslims. Many of them. Excuse me. I posted a link to Pew Research report yesterday. And I'm just going to read you some statistics. Because you're not going to get these kind of statistics from the discourse that we're having now. So somebody had posted, they retweeted Dave, and they said this kind of kindergarten coloring book understanding of Islam and exactly the narrative Islamists promulgate to the ignorant, right? And that's what they said. So I pointed out and I said, speaking of coloring book understanding of Islam, as I demonstrated earlier, a 2017 Pew Research report shows to the contrary. Among statistics that would surprise many Americans. This is the Pew. I'll put this in the show notes because I didn't add it. I'm just doing this on the fly. Pew Research in 2017, they've got like a 5-webpage, huge, lengthy article of a survey that they did with American Muslims. Here are some of the things that they learned. 92%, this is of Muslims in America, 92% were proud to be American. Pretty sure I've heard a lot of MAGA folk tell me that that's what they want. Proud to be American. 82% were concerned about extremism in the name of Islam globally. 72% of them were concerned about extremism within the U.S. That's a huge percent for a religion that's supposedly as violent as people like to say inherently. 88% believe they have a lot in common with fellow Americans. 88% of Muslims surveyed in the United States in 2017 said, I have a lot in common with my fellow Americans. 44% voted in 2016. Have you been hearing all the dog whistles about Sharia law? They're bringing Sharia law. Only 44% even voted in 2016. They're like, how are they going to bring about Sharia law if more than half are not voting? All right. Sorry about the barking. That's the dog. I can't yell at her to be quiet. Not that she would listen anyway. Anyway, 65% believe Islam and democracy are compatible. That's interesting. 65% are like, yeah, our religion works well with democracy in America. 70% believe hard work leads to success. Are you getting the point here? You can't just jump out and see an event and go, aha, violent Islamist. Maybe, maybe not. And you can't just say, well, Muslims are all violent. That's what their religion teaches. Because a lot of them seem to believe quite differently. And Christians, look, I love some of y'all, but I see how you act. Sometimes someone will say, that's not really in the Bible. You're reading that wrong. And people go, oh, I'm not going to listen to somebody who isn't even a Christian tell me about I mean, again, we're talking about reading skills. Okay. We can read. We can determine whether or not you've interpreted something correctly, whether it's the USA Today or whether it's the Bible, right? Now, there may be some more understanding that's necessary when it comes to the Bible, and you can have that argument. That's fine. But the idea of reading and understanding should be pretty consistent, okay? And so if Christians are willing to say that non-Christians don't really get a voice in telling them what the Bible says and doesn't say, since a lot of people like to say this is a Christian nation, or at least predominantly Christian, then perhaps you do the same thing with Islam. And if many Muslims are like, yeah, we're concerned about extreme violence in the U.S. and globally, we don't subscribe to that, we oppose it, perhaps you believe them in the same way that you want people to believe you, that you understand your religion better than the people who are not adherents, than people who do not claim to be a Christian. Okay? Like if you want that, then give it. Do to others what you want them to do to you. That's basically what I'm saying. Treat people how you want to be treated. Very simple. But above all, I think the real message here is we need to be discerning. It is not discerning to paint with broad brushstrokes. All right. That's my show for today, folks. Let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. Yeah, that sounded corny. I'm a dad now. That's what I do. Right? I've been dealing with this nasal congestion. I was out doing the leaves the other day, like 2 days ago, this weekend. And I had a respirator on, a whole ass paint respirator. And I was thinking to myself, I have entered dad mode, like serious dad mode. When you walk out and you're like, I'm wearing a respirator, and I don't care what I look like. I may look like a fool, but I can breathe. That's dad mode right there. The only thing the only thing I'm missing are some New Balances. I get those and I'm done. I'm in dad mode complete. Anyway, what do we got here? Thank you, DL. No, thank you, Keith, for joining the show. Love it. Yesterday was Liberty Day. Happy belated. Happy to you as well. Well, Dave bashed the anti-war to the core guy and called him names. I'm not sure what that is. I'm only talking about his comment and the accuracy. Again, I don't always agree with Dave. I disagree. I still disagree with him. I probably disagreed with him like 2 weeks ago. I don't know. Right? I don't always agree with him. And that's okay. We don't have to agree. All I'm asking people is when somebody says something, to read and comprehend and understand what they are saying and what they are not saying. And that goes for Dave. That goes for, I don't know, Jasmine Crockett, whoever. I don't care who it is. Just be honest in what they are actually saying and what they're not saying. That'll make the world a better place. And that'll help us identify real problems and apply real solutions. That's really the goal here. I don't want killing in any country, but since I don't want it in Palestine or Iran either, then I'm automatically pro-Palestine, Iran, by MAGA echo chambers, and then labeled a liberal. Yes, this is a humongous problem, and I hate it. Hate it, hate it, hate it. So what'll happen is you'll say, I'll demonstrate this through support for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. If you said, yeah, I'm not supporting Trump, immediately people will go, what's so good about Harris? I didn't say anything was actually good about Harris. I said Donald Trump wasn't so good. We're talking about him. We're not talking about Harris right now. But if you want to know about that, I would have said there's a lot about Harris that I think is not good either. That's why I voted for the Libertarian candidate. And if you ask my opinion about that, if you said, well, what's so great about him? The majority of what I would have had to say would have been his policies at the federal level are generally better than the policies of either Trump or Harris, right? But I would have also said he's got some policies that I can't get behind. I don't support, right? That is how you be objective. That's why I'm America's most objective libertarian. That's why. Because I will criticize anyone and everyone. I don't care. Ask my wife. I have to dial it down so I don't get too critical. That way, I don't end up being single or something. Let's see. Typical rhetoric from the duopoly sympathizers. Yes. Because DL is a no caucus punk. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not very friendly to caucuses or anybody. I criticize. I will support you one moment and then literally 5 minutes later be like, dude, what the hell? That's just how I am. That's how I roll. This is who you got. Let's see. I know one pastor that DL is talking about. Yeah, Pastor Tubb. Corny dad jokes. Yep. I got them. They're not good ones, but I got the corny ones. Let's see. Keith says, I do not want the government to be involved in my worship. I might be happier if they left me alone for the most part. Yes. And I don't want the government being involved in anybody's worship. I don't care whether it's Christian, Judaism, or Islam. I don't want the government involved. And when we're making an assessment about what a religion teaches, I want us just to be honest. Either something does or does not teach it. Or maybe there's some ambiguity based on whatever topic we're talking about. There might be, because sometimes even adherents within a religion, they have disagreements. That's okay. Let's see. A YouTube short with DL's dad joke of the day. I don't know if we want to do that. I want the ratings on the channel to go up, not down. Okay? So I don't know if we want to do that. All right, folks. That is my show for today. Hope you found it informative and inspiring. Please do me a favor, help out the channel. Come back later. Let this swirl around in your head. And then come back later and say, DL, I have further comments. Just drop them in the comment section. I read them and I enjoy it. And it helps kind of bump up the algorithm to say, hey, looks like people are interested in this show. Other people should watch it. And they should. And then they'll be wiser and hopefully learn to become more objective, just like me. But with all that being said, I am out. I will see you next Monday, okay? Not tomorrow, not Thursday, not Friday, next Monday. Taking some time off, gonna hang out with my son. Today, though, I gotta go to work. With that, have a good one.
You know that I'm all about supporting organizations that hold my values. Make sure you head on over to blackgunsmatter.shop. They've got apparel, stickers, and more. Use the code LibertyDad, all one word, at checkout to score a 10% discount. Or just hit the referral link in the show notes. That'll make it so much easier. Remember, I'm not just a voice on a mic. I'm a dad who's working hard to deliver to you the best libertarian content. Connect with me on Linktree, where you'll find links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, because every bit helps keep this show rolling. Plus, you can find me on my other platforms to stay in the loop. With your help, this show, The Message of Liberty, will be seen and heard by more people. As always, I appreciate you tuning in and look forward to seeing you in the next episode.